Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Or you could be forgiven with the whole Tyson Fury show in Saudi Arabia for having forgotten that Justis Huni, after almost a year out of the ring and some injury, is returning to action this weekend. He is facing Andrew Tabiti, the former cruiserweight title challenger, on a card on DAZN in Mexico. So it's been relatively low-key in terms of Huni's return, and I guess at the moment there's a lot of boxing fans that aren't really, the world over, they don't know who Justis Huni is at this point. He is one of the best prospects floating around at this stage, currently 7-0, 4 knockouts. It is a case that this is his international debut, and he can make a few waves, albeit I think this card is floating under the radar to some extent, in this fight even more so. But this will give him a bit more exposure to some international markets, because you have a case when he's been fighting in Australia against, for a prospect, really tough opposition in general, and it's a case that he's been able to make a good account of himself. 7-0, 4 knockouts, and he's faced some pretty good opposition. Whainga Opilu, Jack Maris, Arsene Fosso, Christian Soy, Paul Gallen, Joseph Goodall, Kiki Toa-Latelli. Kiki Toa-Latelli has been in tough with the likes of Dempsey McKean. Arguably, some people thought he won that fight, and Joe Goodall. That was a fight where there was a couple of hundred punches landed by Huni. Goodall landed 150. An absolute sort of all-out war where Huni came out on top. And we've subsequently seen Joe Goodall has got an upset win in the United States against Stephen Shaw, and now he's main eventing on a top-ranked card against F.A.A. Jugba in November 2023. So you have a case that, with that win for Goodall, it puts into perspective Justis Huni is actually a guy who probably is a little bit underrated at the moment by a lot of boxing fans, because he's been out of sight, out of mind. When guys aren't campaigning in the United States or the UK, it's harder for them to get traction. But he can make a few waves here with this debut in Mexico, and if he is going to be fighting internationally, United States or UK, I think the matchmaking, it will probably continue to be tough, as it is with this fight. I mean, you consider for a guy who's 7-0, the matchmaking's been incredibly tough overall. He's getting a lot of value out of these early fights. I mean, Kiki Toa-Latelli is no slouch, neither is Joe Goodall. That was the 6th and 7th fight respectively. So Huni is a guy with talent, really good skills, fast hands. I guess the only knock on Huni is that he is a guy that doesn't have a lot of punching power, and that's been demonstrated in recent fights. The likes of the Liotelli or Goodall fights couldn't really put a dent in them, and when you get up to world level, I guess similar to maybe like guys like Joseph Parker and Otto Wallin, going to rely on boxing and moving and skills. Although Justis Huni, as we've seen so far, likes to get up and into a tear-up. He likes to really get amongst it and have a bit of a war. And I guess that strategy at some point, heading towards, fringe contender level fights and maybe world level at some point, he's probably going to have to dial back on that and rely on his skills. And this fight in particular, actually, it was meant to happen a couple of months ago, but Huni got injured, had some ligament damage when he rolled an ankle, and we'll talk about the injury situation soon. But when I did that video, it seemed to be that a lot of Australian fans, Justis Huni fans in particular, they were a little upset that I said that this was a competitive fight. That Andrew Tabiti was no knockover job, that he's a guy who can box and move. He's got a decent style that can, offer something for this fight. But make no mistake, I'm picking Justis Huni to win this one. I think people got a little bit up in their feelings because I deigned to say that this was good matchmaking. And it is, but it continues the theme of Justis Huni's career. Tough matchmaking where he's getting valuable rounds and experience. And I think the thing is that people just need to sort of put their feelings to the side for a minute and go, this guy is being brought up pretty tough in the heavyweight division in terms of the matchmaking and what they're doing with him. But that's not always necessarily a bad thing. And Tabiti's not a big puncher or anything like that, but he's a decent fighter. We saw that at cruiserweight. We saw in his last fight against James Wilson where he pretty much dominated that. That was almost, that was more than a year ago actually at this point. And Justis Huni's fight against Kihito Latelli was almost a year ago. So he's returning from injury, and it's the ankle has been the most recent injury, but he's also got hand problems that have been persistent early in his career. And they have said that they've changed gloves and other bits and pieces. They've gone away from using sort of puncher's gloves to having gloves with more padding. When you consider Justis Huni's not a big puncher, and he's had hand trouble previously earlier in his career before the Gallon fight re-injured it, and then against Kihito Latelli injured his hand again. It beggars belief that they were putting him into gloves that didn't have sufficient protection to protect his hands. And given he's not a huge puncher and he's not getting knockouts at a certain level, I mean, they were just risking injury. It was kind of bizarre. But I think Justis Huni and the way that he's being brought along, I've liked it. I mean, it's different to a lot of other heavyweight prospects coming through, and we are going to see in this fight where he's at, coming off the injury. What impact has the injury, you know, the ligaments in the hands, you know, is there any lasting effect? And we'll get a good read on that, and we'll see where he's really at. Maybe he'll be rusty early on, build into the fight, and I expect that early on it is going to be competitive with Justis Huni starting to get on top. I do expect that this 10-rounder probably goes to a decision. If he does get a stoppage, it would probably be late and by accumulation. Justis Huni doesn't have that knockout power. He is going to wear guys down by accumulation if he's getting stoppages. But I do think more than likely this could go to a decision and Huni gets a sort of 7-3 type of fight. But in the process, he's facing another style that's a little different from the likes of Kihito Latelli, Joseph Goodall, and some of the others that he's fought that are more static, more willing to sort of sit there and trade with him, that sort of thing. I don't think we're going to see that sort of fight. You've got far more finesse from a guy like Andrew Tabiti, who can box and move, who's got fast hands of his own. So I think early on, we're going to see it a little bit cagey and then starting to open up from the mid-rounds. But I do think that Huni can get on top. He is going to be the bigger guy in there, and I do think eventually he is going to wear down his man and start picking up more rounds, especially in the back half of the fight, to get that sort of, you know, it would have been a competitive fight, but it's a relatively non-controversial decision, 7-3 type of fight. Anyway, what do you make of Justis Huni, his return? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.